Welcome to We're Only Human, a podcast focused on blending research and practical advice to help today's HR, talent, and learning leaders improve business outcomes. Let's welcome your host, Ben Eubanks.
Hello everyone, this is Ben Eubanks, host of We're Only Human, and I'm so glad to have you here as we near the holidays. Everyone is always fascinated these days with talking about the future of work. Big air quotes there, the future of work. Sounds so important. But who is the future of work? That's right, it's the students, right? It's the people that are coming up next. It's not just us, but who is actually the future. And the kids that are coming behind us, yes, kids, it's hard to say that, but I do. The people that are coming up behind us are going to be the future of the workplace. So who knows them best? In today's episode of We're Only Human, I had the opportunity to sit down with a longtime friend, Matt Stollak, and talk about these ideas. Matt is actually a professor. He teaches HR courses, and he has for years now. He takes a very different approach to the classroom than most professors do, though. It's not all about the laws, the academic pieces, things like that. It's not a lot of just a bunch of theory and then throw them out into the wild. He tries to make it very practical, and I love that about him and his approach. So if you're hiring new HR professionals, if you're looking for ways to train one that you've recently brought on staff, if you're even looking for ideas on how to improve your own way of looking at the world and make sure that you're as sharp as you can be, Matt has some great ideas for how to go beyond the academic approach and make it very practical and real. This is real learning. And I appreciate Matt for what he's doing to educate the real future of the workforce. And I hope you'll listen in, pick up a few ideas as well for what's around the corner and how to keep yourself sharp. Get ready because class is in session. Now, on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome to We're Only Human. I am Ben Eubanks, your host, and I'm really glad to have you here today. Today I actually have the pleasure of talking with a longtime friend and colleague that I really highly respect. We share a love of burgers and a love of HR, and we're both dads of twins. I mean, what more could you ask for? Without further ado, I'd love to welcome Matt Stollak onto the show. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So I said a couple good things about you, things that I know about you, but I'd love for you to tell everybody else that doesn't know you as well, just to get to know you better, who you are, what you do, something about you.
All right. I'm Matt Stollak. I'm an associate professor of business administration at St. Norbert College. It's a small liberal arts college in a suburb of Green Bay, Wisconsin called De Pere. We're about 2,000 to 2,200 students. I serve as the primary teacher of HR-related classes. I also teach statistics. In about 45 minutes, I'm about to go teach a MBA class on diversity. I serve as the student chapter advisor for SHRM, and I just finished being the co-chair of the Wisconsin State SHRM Conference.
Oh, awesome. I know a lot of our friends are actually in DC this week for the leadership conference at SHRM, getting primed for next year's volunteer efforts. So shout out to all our friends up there, getting their fill of enthusiasm and passion from the mothership at SHRM. How long have you been teaching, Matt?
I've been teaching since 1995. I started at Ohio University. I was a visiting professor there for 2.5 years. The market was not great at that time. I was a couple weeks from moving back to my parents when a job at Mississippi State opened up down in Starkville, Mississippi. I went down there and taught for 5 years and decided I wanted to be a little closer to home. My mom's side of the family's from Wisconsin, so I saw an opening at St. Norbert College and have been here since 2002.
Okay, very cool. That's awesome. I didn't realize that you were basically next door to me down in Mississippi for a while. Interesting. I have one of my good friends, her son is actually at Starkville right now, going through school. So he unfortunately missed the Matt Stollak years. But
yes.
I'm curious, out of all the things you could do, why did you pick teaching? And I would have to imagine that after all that time, I know some of the conversations we've had, some of the points and things I've seen you make online, you've learned a lot of takeaways from that time. I'd love you to share some of those things from that perspective, because a lot of us, we might have had a class, we might have, and some of us might have not. A lot of people fall into HR from other fields. So I'd love to hear a little more about why teaching and some of the things you've taken away from that experience.
Well, I come from a family of teachers. My dad was a professor at Michigan State for some 35, 40 years. My mom was a choir director at the elementary school through being co-chair or director of music at University of Michigan Flint. And I think the biggest draw, and some will scoff at it, but it's really a lifestyle decision that I enjoyed the opportunity, and I always wanted, when I finally had kids, to be able to be there in the morning to send them off to school. I could be home in the afternoon to take them to whatever activities they have. I could be available in the summer when needed. Again, a common belief is that professors and teachers often have summers off. That's often a time for us to catch up on the work that we don't do during the semester. I'm, for example, teaching 4 courses here this last 8 weeks of the semester. We are a self-governing college, so we have a number of committees that we serve on. I was busy with the state conference, but the ability to have a flexible choice in how I spend my day was really attractive. If we were going to talk Hackman and Oldham's job characteristics theory, that would be the autonomy that job provides in terms of scheduling and how I do my work. I don't have to check in with a boss for the most part. A lot of real freedom in what I do. Now, to your second question, some of the takeaways, probably the largest is, and particularly given the discussion that many like to have about generational differences, is that even though my primary audience is 18 to 22-year-olds, 30 students in a classroom are 30 different people. They're not all going to live up to whatever stereotype that generation is going to have. They're 18 years old. It's not so much being part of generation X, Y, Z, millennial. It's that they're 18 to 22-year-olds, and 18 to 22-year-olds have similar interests regardless if it was 1985 or 2018.
Absolutely. That is a big takeaway, and I know that you and I are both friends with Christina Minyard. We actually did a show earlier this year, I believe, that was kind of, we had some fun with it. We were pretty, in people's faces, because we get a lot of those kind of comments and things like about that. You guys are millennials, like, yeah, but she and I are at opposite ends of that spectrum, right? In that class, if we were in your class, we would have been polar opposites, and yet they want to lump all of us together. So I think that's a good point from someone that spends a lot of time with the next generation, and it's always the next generation, right? It's next year, it's going to be another group of people at that same age, and they're going to need the same types of information, the same types of support, things like that. So I think that's a good reminder for everybody probably to point to those things. So one of the things that I really was intrigued by, and again, I said at the beginning, I do respect you, because you've taken this thing that you said, the lifestyle thing, but you've taken this above and beyond what you could have done. You could have said, hey, here's our textbook, we're going to learn from this thing, and this is the Bible, and that's it. But you've also encouraged your students to look at other resources, other things outside of this. And I don't know if it's because you're plugged into that and you've received a lot of value from being active on social media, things like that, or if it's something else that pushed you that. But I know that you recommend they read books, that they read blogs, that they try to follow current practicing HR people. And I'm curious where that whole idea came from.
Again, part of it is really just as there are many different 18 to 22-year-olds, there are many different colleges and universities. If I was at a Research One institution like University of Alabama or Mississippi State or University of Wisconsin-Madison, research would be my driving agenda. Teaching becomes secondary. However, at a smaller liberal arts college like St. Norbert College, the emphasis much more is teaching and preparing the students for the future. I've always had a very active role with SHRM. Once I started becoming a professor, I started getting involved as an advisor at Ohio University. I became the primary advisor when I moved to Mississippi State. I started getting involved with the state council at Mississippi. And so my primary driver was what's going to get those students talking about and be ready for what they're going to get once they get into the workforce.
Interesting. Very cool. It's funny. I was going to ask you, actually, you kind of answered just now. I was going to ask, because you started out in 2009-ish, you said.
Yep.
And I was going to ask if it was still the case, if textbooks are still behind. I think it's always going to be part of it. You know, you and I have talked about this because the book that I've written is coming out later this year, and I turned it in June, and it's about technology, which every single week that goes by, I'm like poking myself a little bit in the chest because it's killing me to think that some of the companies I talked about might not even be here anymore. They were acquired, or there were new companies that would have been great to have in there. And because that sort of industry is so slow to move in general, the publishing industry, and maybe in academia it's even slower, I don't know, but it's so slow that by the time it's published, even if it was the newest, freshest information when it was written, by the time it gets into someone's hands, it's already dated to some degree.
It's just like the laptop you buy at Best Buy or from Apple. The instant you buy it, the new edition's out and you're already out of date.
That's how it always goes. Goes. Oh, goodness. So I think I had this question I want to ask you, and I think you already touched on it a little bit. I would love to you can recap it, you can restate it, you can just say that's exactly what I meant, but I'd love to hear, all of those, you said, 30 students, 20 students, however many are coming through your class, each of those is an individual person, and they're hoping that class is going to help them to be successful at some point in the future. So what is your goal when one of those students steps in, or when you get a new crop of students? What is your goal or ideal outcome as an educator of those future leaders in HR?
It depends really on the level of class that we're talking about. So, we just recently, a couple years ago, required now every student who pursues a business major to have at least an 8-week course in HR. Obviously, HR is much broader than 8 weeks can possibly cover, but at least they're going to get exposure to topics like recruiting and selection and training and development, and at least a very basic look at compensation, because these are factors that they're going to deal with once they get to the workplace. So at least knowing about these topics are worthwhile. So then a separate class is going to be those who might major in, we have what is called a concentration, those students who want to get a little more exposure to the human resource field. Again, I'm the only one on our staff. We're a small college that teaches the class, so it's sort of like you're majoring in me, like it or not. But this is the opportunity then to say, all right, if you want a HR as your chosen field, what kinds of things beyond what we talked about in that initial 8 weeks didn't we cover that is important to know? And what's going to be the future of HR? So, one of the resources, for example, that I used was a couple of your books that you put together back in 2009, 2010. That HR 101 series of blogs. Do amazing things. That was you, right? Didn't you put that? Oh, yep. So it was that. There was a crucial conversations kind of thing. So these were the topics that, all right, you pick up your HR textbook. Is there anything even in HR technology? And so you were kind enough to send me your book, and I'll be using it in the spring. There's not an HR textbook that talks about recruitment marketing or, the pros or cons of even discussing candidate experience. So I'm not sure what many of my more experienced colleagues at other more research one types of institutions are bringing into the classroom. Are they aware of these conversations? You don't see a lot of HR academic Twitter out there, for example. So what my hope is that then those students who are in my classes are at some level getting a competitive advantage by coming to my school than going elsewhere when they move into the workforce.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I think that's it's funny because you said, hey, I got into this thing because of the lifestyle choice, right? But you've not laid back at all, I think. And on the flip side of that, you've really pushed hard to find ways to help these students be really competitive, as you said. And I love the idea of exposing them to these resources, engaging them at a level that's beyond the theory in the textbooks. As I can remember my own education, and I loved the school I went to and everything else, but even though I got a degree in HR, there were only maybe 3 classes that were around HR type stuff. The rest of it was more general and broad in terms of the focus. And it's funny that you said they're majoring in you. The professor that taught 2 of the HR classes, everybody that I knew was like, hey, whatever you do, avoid that guy. I'm like, good luck with that. He's the only one that's teaching.
That's right.
Teaching the HR classes. And it turned out I loved him. He was one of those that was really hard. He was fair, but he was really hard, but you learned so much in the class. And so you're challenging the students. And I think ultimately that's what's going to play out. Because I talk to employers all the time about, they're asking me, hey, how can we make sure that the people that are coming in are prepared because they don't have, this skill or that skill. They don't understand this context. And I said, it's for a lot of those colleges, I don't want to speak for you because you're doing a good job of that. A lot of colleges are saying, hey, we're going to teach them this basic stuff and the employers will handle the rest. And the employers are thinking the college is going to teach them that basic stuff. And then, we'll have someone ready to work. But the research shows that's not quite the case. And so there's still pretty much a pretty big gap there in terms of how prepared people are. And again, that's not a generational thing. That's every single person that comes out of college thinks they're ready to hit the ground running, and they all quickly find out there's a lot more stuff they don't know. But I think that the approach you're taking to expose them so they can realize, hey, I am not a recruitment marketing expert, but I know what it is. I've heard about it. That one kind of rung my bell because I was writing about that today, actually. I was writing for I was writing a blog about the topic of there's no degree in recruiting, right? There's no one that's going to master in recruiting, But at the same time, you need to understand a lot of the different methods and tools and technologies or practices that are out there. And there's nothing right now in academia that exposes people to those things short of the kind of approach you're taking, saying, hey, take a look at this guy, follow Tim Sackett because he knows about recruiting, or whoever it happens to be.
And I don't want to sell the rest of the business world short.
Yeah.
And our major. HR is certainly part of it, but we also want our students to have the marketing piece, the finance piece, 2 classes in accounting, a liberal arts core requirement, a statistics course, 2 economics courses, so that they're not just HR, they're getting a well-rounded business education with specialty in HR, so that they can speak the language of business, not just HR.
Oh, thank goodness for that.
Yes.
Yes.
So don't think I'm just saying you're coming here and you're taking 8 classes out of your 32 with me. You've got a whole, array of courses, of which I'm only a small part. But we want to make sure that our students are as well-rounded as possible, so they're good corporate and social citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're talking to a lot of people that are right now that work in HR, that are business leaders, that hire HR people. And if you could give them a piece of advice on hiring that next generation, they're looking for someone, what sort of things should they look for? What sort of questions should they ask? Because I hear from students and recent grads all the time, hey, I'm looking for a job, and they're telling me I have to have experience to get this entry-level HR job, and they're completely stuck. And when I talk to employers, I recommend that experience might not even be relevant or helpful. They need to look for other things in that conversation. But I'm curious if you could give the employer a piece of advice, something, from your perspective that you're training these people up. What should those employers be asking about? What sort of things should they be looking for to figure out if they actually, have some sort of grasp, they have a little street smarts or something else? I'm kind of curious what your approach would be.
Well, one, it goes back to our earlier discussion about don't make stereotypical assumptions about the students coming out. That if you're going in thinking, all right, they're Gen Z and so they're X, Y, and Z, you're going to miss out on quality applicants. I would also argue if I'm an employer looking to hire HR professionals out of college, I'd start getting involved at an earlier time. That there are a lot of students who want the connection to the business world. Come to the classroom, reach out to the professors at the local university, come speak at a student SHRM meeting, get involved with whatever board the college has that might be overseeing the particular major. And so this is going to get your name recognition out there. They're going to suddenly put a name and a face with a company. And if you're being active and talking and helping them with resume reviews, mock interviews, bringing real life stories about what's going on in your career, including all the horror stories that might be occurring, these students are going to be much more interested in your company, what we might call anticipatory socialization, that you become familiar with the organization without necessarily even visiting the job site. You suddenly say, what is this company about? I might be more prodded to go on YouTube and look up videos about the company, check out the corporate career website. And so being active with the college instead of waiting for the applicants to come pouring in, going to a career fair, by taking a more active role, you're going to have the pick of the top students you want to get.
I love that one. There's actually one of my good friends runs an HR department here locally, and she does that. She'll speak at the SHRM chapter for the students. She'll, be the judge for the student practice when they're doing their practice competitions, things like that. So she tries to be integrated there. And the last 3 hires, she always hires and moves her people up a step as she's hiring. And so as they've come along, that person that started out as an intern becomes the HR assistant, becomes the HR specialist, becomes now the HR, senior HR, whatever their title is now. But she's done that 3 or 4 times, and everyone's like, how do you find the good ones? She's like, because I'm there. I know who the good ones are because I've seen them. I've talked to them. I'm not looking at a stack of resumes and trying to guess at, 6 people that have a degree and all have the same, 3 or 4 jobs to just basic experience in the workplace. And she said, I'm not trying to judge them based on those things. I'm basing them off the conversations I've had or the people that I've looked at. I've looked them in the eye and things like that. So, I'd echo that for sure. That's something that more employers should do, especially if they're looking to do that in the near future. Spend a little bit of time there. And usually, I don't want to, again, put it on you, but professors love hearing that from those people. They love having a chance to share from practical stories in the classroom. They love being able to share how things actually work in the real world. They love being able to tie those things back to what they're teaching. Like, hey, I taught you this, but here's how it's going to look when you get out there. And being able to connect those things, because for the students, again, it gives them that edge, helps them to understand. It's not all just theory, but some real practical insights behind that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. We are, as a college, for the first time in 15 years, which is way too long, but we're re-engaging with a job evaluation system. We're re-looking at our compensation plan. And so we had a consultant come in who the college has hired to talk about what they're going to be doing for the next 6 to 7 months in getting this all ready. And one of my students happened to works as a HR intern for the college in the HR department, was sitting in the meeting, and he could see directly the connection between what we were doing in our compensation class and what the consultant was doing. So suddenly they're saying, I'm not simply sitting in my ivory tower spouting, highfalutin ideas into the wind, that the material they're getting is the way things actually are doing. So it sort of provides very good confirmation that what they're getting in the classroom will pay off for them in what they're actually going to be doing on the job.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. That's a cool story. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome. So this has been fun. And again, I would love to keep you all night, but you said you got to prepare for a class. So if someone wants to connect with you, they want to follow you online, they want to learn more about you and the work you're doing, or just to hear some of your wit and your charm and all the good things that you have to share, what's the best way for someone to do that?
Probably best is Twitter. My Twitter handle is @AKA Bruno. It's a college nickname I had, was Bruno. And just a story with that is, once Facebook started coming around 25 years after I graduated, since I'm that old, from college, many people, when I started connecting with them on Facebook, didn't know who I was. They thought my real name was Bruno. And that made me think I could get away with so much more in college if I knew 20 years later no one would have that connection with my real name. So you can go ahead and reach me at AKA Bruno. I'm on LinkedIn at Matthew Stollak, Stollak. Or you can email me at matthew.stollak@snc.edu. Stollak.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. This has been a fun conversation about the future of HR, and I don't think that enough of us stop to think about that. We want to think about the things that are the here and now and the stuff we're worried about, but we talk about the future of work and everything else, and from what I've seen, the research I've done, all the conversations I'm having, people are going to still play a big part in that, and you're helping to get those people ready for what's next, what's ahead, getting them ready for the workplace. So thank you for the work you're doing, and thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
Absolutely. To everybody else, this has been We're Only Human. I'm Ben Eubanks, your host, and we'll catch you next time. Awesome. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
I made a note, and I was going to ask you about the technology thing, and you happened to say that right before I was able to ask you, so I thought that was funny that we were thinking about kind of along the same lines about some of those things.
Excellent.
Oh, goodness. I'll make sure and get the link in the show notes to your Twitter, your LinkedIn.
Of course.
I'll grab your headshot, if that's okay, off of Twitter, if it's a good one. I don't even know if it's a real one or not.
On Twitter,
I see a picture, I know it's you. I just don't remember if it's even a real picture of you or not. Is that weird?
Yeah, I mean, it's like 6 years old. I should update it, but I mean, it's a Heather Bussing original.
Okay. That's where mine comes from too, I think. So
I think it was Atlanta.
Okay. We should all have like a thank you Heather Day for all of our headshots that she just randomly catches. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you again, Matt. I appreciate it. I have a completely random thing to ask you really quick before we cut off.
Sure.
If I ever have a stats question, can I
Go ahead and email me. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'm about to start a new research study, I think, and we're actually trying to prove if sentiment analysis is more accurate than like open surveys, or not open surveys, than like structured surveys,
Okay.
multiple choice questions, things like that. And so anyway, I don't know that that's the one to like tap into Matt, my phone a friend for, but I'm doing. Looks like I'll have several research studies in the coming year, and as much as I loved stats in school, it's been a long time, and so it'd be nice to have like a second look or something else over my shoulder, just to answer a question or help me to see if there's any big things in there that I'm missing or whatever else. So.
Absolutely.
Anyway, fun stuff. Okay, thank you again. Appreciate you, and I'll talk to you soon. I'll shoot you a note when this is ready to go live, okay?
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Matt. Bye.
Yep, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to We're Only Human. Please take a moment to share this episode with another HR leader who might see it as a valuable resource in their daily work. For more information about the podcast and to see all our show archives, please visit upstarthr.com.